talk about, we want to dig in a little bit into this idea of the church being scaffolding. And that's not a negative thing, but it puts a real interesting lens on how we view the church. So let's start with that. When we talk about the church being scaffolding, what does that mean to you?
Well, and first of all, jump in the comments if you would like. We'd love to hear from you as we go through this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So scaffolding to me, I mean, we know what scaffolding is, right? You put it up around a house or around a building or something to help you build it, to put on the sides, to put up, do whatever you need as you're building.
Yep.
So I think if we're applying that to a church perspective or a church lens, it's the things that we do to help us build something. So the question is, what are we building?
Yep. Yeah, so I had pulled like a little definition. Scaffolding is a structure that allows people to stand on a stable platform for work at height or in hard to reach places. And so there's we've come across some kind of different definitions of what scaffolding is really referring to here. I have a real specific picture in my mind, and I love to share. This is just my view of it. But I view each of us building an individual, personal relationship with God. And so that's the thing that we're building, and built up around it is all of this scaffolding. And like that definition says, we're standing on that scaffolding, and we're wearing our paint covered clothes, and we're building something beautiful. And this scaffolding is helping us reach the high places and the hard to reach places, metaphorically in our testimony. And so the church aids us in that way, in building something that is personal to each of us and beautiful to each of us. So that's how I like to think about it.
And I think it's interesting. I think it's really important that it's a personal journey, personal connection to God that we're building. But I also think it's something important to be building is the beloved community, building Zion,
Absolutely.
Building something together as a community. And so maybe those are two separate projects. I don't know how we want to look at that, but
and the metaphor is flexible, right? And so it can mean what you need it to mean. Mine was a very personal vision, and you've got a very community oriented vision.
Yeah. So the way that I think of scaffolding is when I'm thinking of the church as scaffolding, and the practices and the policies, the programs within the church as scaffolding. Those are just one thing in my tool belt. It's a pretty large tool belt to contain scaffolding.
Sure
but one thing in my tool belt to help me get to my heavenly parents. And so as I have, if we want to call it, deconstructed my faith, or kind of started to look at things from a new way, evolved my faith. Those programs and policies in the church are one way, but I'm also learning from Richard Rohr and Nadia Bowles-Weber and Sarah Bessey and these other people that are giving me other tools and other perspectives and ideas about how to connect with my heavenly parents. And so I think that's really important to have that mindset of like that helps me not be afraid of people that are not LDS.
Okay.
Because they're just also giving me tools that will help me in my relationship with my parents. Yeah. And so I think that's actually a really beautiful way to look at
I love that.
At religion in general, at our church, at any church, just something that helps us accomplish something.
Yeah, I like that. Now, the concept of the church as scaffolding, as far as we can track back, goes back to Harold B. Lee in 1967. Seems to be the first one to have used the term. And I don't know if this is an LDS specific thing. It does seem like it shows up in other areas of Christianity or maybe religion or maybe broader applications than that. But Harold B. Lee, 1967, and he was talking about families, and he was talking about parenting, and he was talking about a bunch of stuff, but then he says, much of what we do organizationally is scaffolding as we seek to build the individual, and we must not mistake the scaffolding for the soul.
So
love
good.
this.
Yeah.
Love this. Okay. I love the direct language. I love the must not. When he says we must not mistake the scaffolding for the soul. So you take that. What do you take away from that?
Yeah, so to me, that means the policies and the programs and all of those things that are, even the covenants, like all of that stuff, the ordinances, those things are not as important as the soul.
Okay.
We can't mistake them. We can't put all of our focus and devotion and our testimony in and all of that on those programs
Right.
and policies. We have to care about the individual, because those programs and things are not going to continue on
Right.
into heaven. You know, they're not going to be there in the eternal life, but the people are. And so
Right.
we have to care for the soul, the soul of the person.
Now, maybe all of you are much smarter than me, but this is actually a really important point for me, because for a long time, I believed that the church was the point. And I believe that righteousness was measured by, are you going to church? And, you know, even talking about somebody like, oh, that person stopped going to church. They must be, that's an indication of their righteousness, which I don't think is necessarily the case.
Or they stopped reading their scriptures, or stopped going to the temple, or, you know,
Correct,
whatever.
on all of those.
Yeah, fill in whatever part of the church you want to put in there.
Yep. And for a long time, I did not separate those concepts. The idea of the scaffolding versus the beautiful thing that you're building. I thought the scaffolding was the point. And I am learning and have learned that the church itself is not the point. The point is what we are building. And again, you may use the metaphor differently there, but for me, that's building a personal relationship with God, and that's what's going to be eternal. We look at young men and young women programs, and primary, and food storage, and ministry, and all of these things, and they're all great.
They all are tools to help us.
They all are tools to help us do something that's more important than any of those things.
Yeah, I love, so this book is Come As You Are from Sam Norton. He's a great guy, lives out in England with his wife Jen, and this is a fantastic book if you haven't read this. But he says in here, I can clearly see how my faith was maturing, moving from a dependence on the church to a dependence on Christ. And I think that that's kind of what we're talking about here, is understanding that the church isn't the point. We don't need to have a dependence on the church, but it's those doctrinal parts that do take us closer, that help us strengthen our relationship with our heavenly parents. That's what's actually important, and where we need to put our dependence, if that's even what you want to call it.
Right.
But
so other general authorities have talked about this. Notably, Neil A. Maxwell talks about this really clearly, really kind of picks up that same vibe from Harold B. Lee that we quoted earlier. This is from a BYU devotional in October 1980. He says, let's see, talking about understanding the difference between ends and means, and see that some church aids are, in a sense, scaffolding for the soul, which scaffolding one day will be removed, like water wings or training wheels, which is more metaphor on there. It's like training wheels. But he said also at General Conference in 1982, in our striving to be prepared, let us be careful to rely on parents, priesthood, and principles. That's what he says we should rely on. The 3 Ps. Parents, priesthood, and principles, and on scriptures, temples, and leaders who lead to see us through. Let us not mistake program scaffolding for substance. So he throws in that word program there. Let's not mistake program scaffolding. Again, programs of the church, which are all good things that are put in place to help us on our journey, like training wheels, like scaffolding.
Yeah. And some of those things aren't going to work for us, Okay. And so I think that's where the individuality can come in, because, like, for example, we have a son that is into marching band, and during marching band season, and like he does the pit for the plays at the school and stuff, he can't go to Young Men's. He can't go to those activities because he's so busy with these other things. And I think that's okay, because he's getting growth in other places, and that part of the scaffolding at that point isn't serving him.
Yeah.
And so before, and especially when we were young,
Yes.
we would have said, no, your church stuff comes first. You have to go to your young men or, whatever activity.
Because that's the measure of righteousness.
Right.
If you're not there, you are being
righteous.
unrighteous. You are sinning. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with that a little bit. Anne's way better about this than I am. Because, one of our boys will come to us and say, do I have to go to young men's? They're just playing basketball. And my default is, of course you have to go to young men's tonight, or whatever it is. And, but the reality is, like, if it is serving you, then yeah, you totally should.
Yeah.
But it's not sinful or unrighteous or whatever, to use the tools in your tool belt appropriately.
Yeah. So I think that there's easily ways that we could kind of, structure out what is scaffolding, what is culture and, temporal things in the church that won't be around forever, versus what is doctrine. But I really think for a lot of people, that is going to be an individual journey to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. I mean, we can say, the activities of the church are temporal. They're not going to be going to heaven. The policies are not going to follow us to heaven. There's a lot of things like that can be a lot just for us now. And then finding what does feed your soul, what does connect you to your heavenly parents, what does help build that community, the beloved community. Those are things that you want to put your emphasis into. And that's going to look different for everybody. Yeah.
I had a run-in with this when I was in the bishopric in our ward near Seattle where we lived for a long time. And I went to go extend a calling to a woman in the ward to serve in the Cub Scouts, which is gone.
Not a church calling.
And
not a church. I hate Scouts.
Not a church organization.
I said it.
All right, we're on the record here.
I said it. I don't even care.
We're not a scouting family. If scouting is important to you, that's great.
Yes. That's your tool in your tool belt. I dropped that tool long ago.
Different things for different strokes for different folks, right? Anyway, so I sat in their living room across from this woman and her husband, and I extended the calling to be a den leader or whatever in Cub Scouts. And she laughed at me.
It wasn't me.
No. Somebody else.
Just kidding.
She laughed at me. She's like, no, we don't do that. And I was like kind of taken aback. And she's like, our son does swimming. He has swim practice every day of the week or, whatever it was. She's like, he can't go anyway. And he does swimming, which teaches him discipline and, hard work and all of these things. So, no thanks, sort of a thing. And I was like, but that's a church sanctioned thing. At least you have to go. And you probably talked me down from it of like, oh yeah, cool. Swimming. Yeah, it sounds great. Swim practice. All right. Sounds really good.
Doing what's right for your family.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah. It's kind of a good thing.
Yeah. And I collided just headlong with this idea because the black and white thinking of, no, you have to do these things, was still really rigid to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I, again, in this book, I found, so there were these few little like personal anecdotes from people that, had written letters to Sam. And I think that this kind of gets to some of the stuff that we're talking about. So this person says, I consider myself a convert in the church, but not a convert to the church. My conversion and my faith center on Jesus Christ. And there was something somewhere else. They were talking about, Sam and Jen were talking about how they are not disciples of the church, but they want to aspire to be disciples of Jesus Christ. And so I think that as we are finding what our focus is, how we're going to have that connection with our heavenly parents, that's where this stuff comes in, that we we can have loyalty to the church. We're not trying to say the church is not important.
Right.
It's important to go and to be in community and to serve each other. And there's so many lessons that we learn in that structure of the church. But as President Lee is saying, we can't get caught up in that. We can't mistake that scaffolding for the importance of the people. And that's where we focus on Jesus Christ. We are converts to Jesus Christ and to his teachings. The church just kind of helps us get there.
Yeah. And it's for that exact reason that when I first heard this idea of the Church As Scaffolding, Church As Scaffolding, it would have been some years ago, I struggled with it because to me it painted this picture of the church as something less important, or even kind of disposable. Like, again, you think of scaffolding around a building that's being built. When the building's done, they get rid of the scaffolding. And so I was like, oh, so the church is just something you use for a while and then you dispose of when you're done, or whatever. But I think if the thing that we're building is eternal, then we're certainly not going to complete it in this life. If it's our relationship with God, or something larger like that.
Well, can I jump in? Because even if we're looking at it as building the beloved community or Zion, we're not going to be there. And if we were, we'd be translated, right? City of Enoch, they were done. They lost their scaffolding and they all were lifted up into heaven. We are not there yet.
Yep. And Elder L. Tom Perry, in 2012, referenced this scaffolding idea again, and really put to bed this very specific concern that I had. So he cites Harold B. Lee. Again, much of what we do organizationally in the church is scaffolding. As we seek to build the individual, we must not mistake the scaffolding for the soul. That's the Harold B. Lee part there. Here's where he clarifies. President Lee was not minimizing the role of the church in the salvation of men, women, and families. Rather, he taught powerfully that the core of the gospel of Jesus Christ is individuals, families, and homes with which the church functions to support. The church, therefore, is the scaffolding with which we build eternal families. Which sounds remarkably like home-centered, church-supported type things, which that church-supported language even is very scaffolding type language. And the concept of home-centered is a little difficult for some people, or families, or that sort of thing. But even if it's individual-centered and church-supported, I think that gets that same message across.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle sometimes to kind of reconcile, now that I have this understanding and see church functions and church things as scaffolding. I do have a tendency to just say, well, I don't need that, not for me, that sort of thing. And I think that is a big part of my spiritual journey. As we were talking, earlier about how much emphasis and weight we put on the church, that it kind of held over our lives.
Yeah.
And so I have had to figure out what is important for me. What part of those things do I want to put my energy into? We're busy parents with 4 kids, and I can't do everything. And so what are the things that are going to feed me and give me that conduit to my heavenly parents? What parts of it do I need to focus on right now? And I think that's an important thing, to kind of have that that personal introspection, and say, what's feeding me? What can I do? And also, how can I help? In what ways can I help feed others as we're building this community? But I think, that's going to change at different times in your life. That's going to be a fluid thing, and you don't have to maybe be stuck and only do it one way, but it's going to have to be fluid and malleable as you go throughout your life.
Yeah, and that intersects with another term that shows up in the church sometimes, which is this idea of cafeteria Mormons. And I just want to address that, because we're talking about, take the things that are in your tool belt, the parts of the scaffolding that are serving you, that are building you up, that are strengthening you. And if there's something that's not, then, maybe leave that one out there for the moment. This idea of cafeteria Mormons comes up, and to be super frank here, it comes across as a really judgy thing, where we want to put this stake in the ground and say, either you're all the way in or you're all the way out. And if you're part way in, don't even show up. We don't even want to see you. We only want you to be showing up on Sunday if you are all the way in. And I hope people don't really mean it that way.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like that's the way that concept gets taught.
Yeah, it's a huge turnoff.
It really is. Because the reality is we all pick and choose. Even the most ardent, doing all of the things people in the church, there's something you're not doing all the way. It's always that way. You could always be attending the temple more, or you could always have more food storage, or, food storage. Oh boy. Okay. But there's a great book by Chris Kimball called Living on the Inside of the Edge, where he talks about this. And I love the grace that he approaches this concept with, this idea of cafeteria Mormons. He says, if all you can do is show up and sit this is not a direct quote.
Okay.
It sounded like I was starting to quote. This is the general idea that he's talking about. But he says, if all you can do is show up and sit in the back of sacrament meeting and leave after the first hour is over, and if that's all you can do right now, do it. And show up and be a part of it. If where you are right now is you are attending all the activities and you're doing all the things and that's feeding your soul right now, terrific. And if you're somewhere in between there, but you don't want to go to Young Men's because it's just playing basketball or whatever, do the things that are helping you grow spiritually, because at the end of the day, you're trying to build something beautiful. You're trying to build that personal relationship with God, that beloved community, and you're going to stand on that scaffolding to help you do that, and you're going to stand on the parts that are going to help you.
Yeah. I remember when I might have shared this on here before, I don't remember, but when I was, we probably had 3 kids at the time, and they were all, I don't know, under 7, something like that.
Yep.
Little kids. And anytime I would try to read my scriptures, I would fall asleep because I was so tired. And I remember going to church one day, and we were talking about all the things that we need to be doing, and it was in Relief Society, and all the ways to be a good member of the church, and scripture reading was always mentioned. Read your scriptures, go to church, say your prayers. Those are the things. And I, in tears, I was like, I can't do it. I can't read my scriptures. I just fall asleep. And I felt so much shame for that, and guilt for not being able to do such an easy thing as read my scriptures. And this sweet woman in the ward said, there's a time and a place for everything, and you don't need to be bogged down right now by that guilt and shame of not reading your scriptures. You'll find a time to do it. And I've loved that story and that lesson that she taught me right then. And now, as whatever, 7 years later or whatever it is down the road, I still don't read the scriptures every day in that way. We read with our kids, but I don't read personal scriptures. But I am studying things and reading Christian authors and different things, and I am immersed in the words of God in so many different ways. And I think that is what is feeding me right now. And so it may not look the way that we're prescribed to do it at church all the time, but it is what is feeding me deeply and what resonates with me. And I have no shame or guilt about that, because I'm taking the tools that I have that are available to me, and I'm using them in ways that actually feed me and build that relationship with my heavenly parents. And so I think that's kind of the point, right? Like,
and that's where that's kind of where I was thinking as you were talking about that, is what is the point? Was the point the number of minutes that you spent reading the scriptures?
And the canonized scriptures,
right?
Even.
Yeah. Was the point the act of reading the scriptures?
The checkbox.
I suggest that it was not. But if the point was edify yourself, learn and grow spiritually, and hey, the scriptures are a great way to do that, yes, I think we're getting somewhere there. Yeah. Like, I really feel like, okay, maybe this idea of like, oh, read the scriptures 15 minutes every day or whatever, that's scaffolding.
Yeah.
And can that be a great way to edify yourself and grow spiritually? Absolutely. It does not mean it's the only way. It does not mean it's going to be the right way in that time of life and these sorts of things. Is attending all your young men activities or young women activities great? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Are they the point? They're not the point. And the point, again, that beloved community, your relationship with God, your point is something much more eternal than just what are the programs of the church at that given time.
Yeah. And I think being able to figure that out is a sign of your maturing faith. That you're not stuck in this, like, I have to follow every single rule. I have to be 100% in line doing what I'm called to do. You know, that's where the religious scrupulosity comes in.
Right.
But as we mature past that, as our faith matures and we're able to see what the point is and you know, glean from the different activities what we're supposed to glean.
Yep.
I think that's just such a wonderful path to be going down. I don't even want to say like place to be, because I don't want to stop the possibility of faith growing, but it is such a great path to be on, to be able to mature in that way with your faith.
Yeah. And I feel like I have to say this again, but like not tell anybody to not read their scriptures.
Right.
Not tell anybody to stop attending ward functions, that sort of thing. Instead, I think what we're saying is recognize the point. Recognize what those things exist to do.
Yeah, dig deeper.
Right. They exist to help you in some way. You know, and if
or to help others in some way.
Ooh, I like that. You know, if it's a ward potluck or something, maybe the point is to come build the community and lift others and, you know, provide a way for people to socialize. And that's all great stuff. If you don't feel like you can go, it's not something you need to repent of. You know, it wasn't the point, and you can still be building that relationship with God, that community, those things that are more important and more eternal.
Especially if the reason you can't go is because you have, I don't know, PTA meeting to go to, or some other, you know, social justice meeting, or, you know, some other culture or a community event that you need to go to, or, you know, a kid's soccer game or whatever it is.
Plenty of those.
Like that's also building community. It's doing stuff that's important. Nice. And so again, it gets to that point of what we're doing here on earth. We're here to grow. We're here to learn, to connect with our heavenly parents, to build that beloved community. There are a myriad of ways to do that, and it's going to look different for everybody.
I love that. We've been kind of on one. We've been talking for a long time here. If you have things that you want to throw into the comments, questions, anything, please do. Otherwise, I really like where we landed with this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, this is a good topic. Really like this one. Yeah. If you couldn't tell by my kind of enthusiasm as we talked about it.
Yeah, and leave comments. We'll post this video, this live, on our profiles. But let's keep the discussion going in the comments. You know, what sort of things have worked for you? What doesn't? How can you take this tool of the church that we've been given to connect more with your heavenly parents, or to build that community? And what other tools are in your belt? What other ways are you finding to do that? Because it's going to be different for everybody, and we'd love to hear how it works for you. Yep.
All right. Great to see you all. Thanks for joining. Or if you watched it taped, recorded later, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate all of you, and we will see you next time.
See you later.